everything I associated was with food. So every reference of when meeting my father was like smelling Indian spices and making Indian flatbreads. So those became memories and association of culture. That was me like discovering who I was. Not necessarily all the other references with culture. It was always food that stuck with me the most, and I held on the most, that helped define me. And with that said, it took me a very long time to find out who I was and where I came from because of, I guess, the moving around and always having to assimilate. And it was more so just survive, make money, and become something, as opposed to what do you want to really become? Who do you want to ultimately be? What is that going to mean?
Have you decided what you're going to get?
Oh, yeah, definitely we're going to get one of each.
One of each. Got it.
Hi, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of One of Each. As you might know already, this is a place where I love to have friends, people I admire, people I love, to come here, share stories around the table, stories about food, and discuss whatever we want to discuss, have an open conversation. And today, it's a very special day. I have Timon Balloo with me. Timon, welcome. You say always you're a big fan of mine, but also I'm a big fan of yours. I love everything that you do. We're going to walk through an impressive history of great places, including what you're doing now, what you plan to do in the future. So, Timon, thanks a lot for accepting the invitation. It's an honor to have you here.
Oh, my God, man. You already know it's a pleasure. It's my honor to be here. Super proud of what you're doing for the culture of food and cuisine, getting the message and the word out there, the authentic voice. And you've always been a great supporter, so I'm honored to be here in, like, your world, kind of.
Thank you. Thanks. It's our world now. No, and as I mentioned, I don't know where to begin and I relate a lot to you in terms of like origins and family, even though we might have different origins, but me too, I was like born in Venezuela from Lebanese parents. My mother was Lebanese, raised in Brazil. Then I moved to the US. So it's like a mixture of many things. And when I look at you, I see a reflection of that. So tell me a little bit about it. Like, I know you're like have Indian Trinitarian background. Marissa's Colombian, Thai. So that's fascinating. Like, tell me a little bit about your family, your origins, how that shaped who you are now.
Okay, well, my name is Timon Balloo. I live here in Miami, Florida, but I was raised in the San Francisco Bay Area.
But you were born in New York, no?
I was born in New York. So my parents are both from Trinidad. My father is Indian and my mother is Chinese, Black, Arawak, indigenous Trinidadian. So a mixture of. So there's some Portuguese, Spanish. So my parents raced to New York to make sure I was born with a United States passport, like some immigrants do. But they couldn't stand each other, had a divorce very quickly. And my mother raised me as a single mother in the San Francisco Bay Area. She moved as far away from my father as possible. So I was raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. It was almost like we were running from the police or something, because we moved almost every year for 15 years.
Wow.
So all over the Bay Area, from, Daly City to San Leandro, Hayward, Oakland, all over. And I did not meet my father until I was 10 years old. And then
he was still in New York.
He was in New York.
Okay.
So that was the first time I visited New York. First time I had a father figure and my father in my life. First time I was able to travel back to Trinidad, see Diwali Festival of Lights, see what Trinidad was, and all of these things. Like I can understand now what you were saying about your history. I can see how that association works, because as a young immigrant kid growing up, first generation, you have a lot of association, or I had a lot of association issues because you have your ethnicity in your house, what you're trying to assimilate in the world when you go to school and the kids around you, and then figure out who the hell you are, you know? So for me, food was always a comfort thing. Just because I was always a chubby fat kid, and it was, you know, whether it was psychological or whatever, food was comfort, and everything I associated was with food. So every reference of when meeting my father was like smelling Indian spices and making Indian flatbreads. So those became memories and association of culture. That was me like discovering who I was. Not necessarily all the other references with culture. It was always food that stuck with me the most, and I held on the most, that helped define me. And with that said, you know, it took me a very long time to find out who I was and where I came from because of, I guess, the moving around and always having to assimilate. And it was more so just survive, make money, and become something, as opposed to what do you want to really become? Who do you want to ultimately be? What is that going to mean? It was more so just like survive, make money, and it doesn't matter what you do
and
to do that.
what you say is super interesting, and I want, because it's almost a cliche, but it's also true. Like, and many of the friends who have been here in the show also, and we know this from other friends in the industry, when we talk about how we got into food or what was our relationship with food when we were kids, people mention, no, my grandma would cook for me, or I would be with my grandma or with my mom cooking and helping. That's like from a very early age, creates that connection. In your case, you mentioned your mom was a single mom. You were all over the place. Then you went to New York for probably a couple of years. So
a couple months just to
a couple
visit,
months,
yeah.
sorry. So there's no grandmother. How was that connection? Like, what
That
drove
sparked
you?
it?
Yeah, what was that spark?
So there was no grandmother, but what happened for me was growing up on Saturday mornings, instead of watching cartoons, I used to watch a show called Yan Can Cook.
Oh, I remember that one.
So that would be the time that we'd hang out with my mom, and she'd throw on the show. And I was mesmerized because I saw this Chinese chef using the cleaver, and he was so theatrical, and he, you know, watching that knife, it was like freaking crazy. It was like a, you know, the Crocodile Dundee type of like, in the kitchen. And I was mesmerized. But growing up, I never thought I could be a chef. My mom had a little catering business, trying to survive on the weekends, doing like spring rolls and making big like Caribbean style rice and peas and brown stew chicken to like office workers or whoever. I don't know who she sold it to.
How would you help her? Like,
Yeah, I'd help her make all the spring rolls and, you know, stuff like that. One of my best friends that I grew up with, his family was Filipino. So his family would always cook every single night. So it would always be helping them make, whether it was spring rolls in my house or lumpia in their house. So there was always food. And what I started to see and recognize was food was a very big gathering milestone for family. And I realized just internally, I longed for a bigger family. It was just me and my mom. I'm a single child. So I guess I, you know, always considered food to kind of be associated with happiness and that joy. So I guess I strived towards it. But at the end of the day, I wasn't trying to do that. My mother wanted me like a professional. She wanted me to go to the military and see the world, and she thought that would be the best ticket. And I had big issues with authority and following the rules and so forth. So I was actually, you know, at the age of 15, she remarried, and that's when we came to South Florida. So from San Francisco to Broward.
And that was your first time in Florida?
That was my first time in Florida. My mother remarried a Jamaican man, so my stepfather was Jamaican. Again, being very Trinidadian, we were very Asian during the week, so a lot of rice, stir fries, And then on the weekend when my mom had time to cook, she would cook like oxtail and brown stewed chicken, and she'd have time to spend the day and leave the food on the stove. So that's how my life kind of was. In my life, and defines like the way I do restaurants now, it's a lot of music. So I maybe attribute that because my mother would blast like Gregory Isaac music on Sundays, and that's like every time I cook Caribbean food, I gotta throw on like old reggae.
Oh, nice.
You know what I mean? So there's all these associations that kind of define the what side brain you are, I guess. And I guess I'm the creative. So for me, it's music, it's senses, it's sensory, it's food. It's also the adrenaline, the tension, the intensity of the service, the adrenaline of time management and the pressure. So somewhat, I guess, masochistic, but that's like the adrenaline type thing.
Yeah.
So it's food, music. So when I took the leap of faith, which is based off of the girl that's my wife now. I met a girl. I was on my way to Wall Street. She convinced me to follow my dream to be a chef. We followed that dream. It allowed both of us to travel the world, live in multiple cities and countries. 28 years later, she's my wife,
Nice.
mother to my 2 daughters. And our most recent restaurant is her middle name because like the circle of life of saying, no, I wouldn't do this and found this and it went well. And then saying, no, I would never open there. And I did. And it went well. You kind of have your goals and you could, as all professionals do, we have to check off the boxes, and whether you go to school or you have to work for certain people and you have to gain the credit until you put your own spin on the foundation of what your medium is. And hopefully you have talent in between that to make it beautiful, your version of it. And that's the fucking road.
Wow.
Me.
And that's the Katherine now.
That's the Katherine now.
Yes, in Fort
But we
Lauderdale.
took many steps to get there. It took a long time to get there.
Amazing place. I've been lucky to, like, every time I need to go pass by Fort Lauderdale, even if I'm driving back from wherever I am up north, I try to stop there. I love it. And I feel also kind of guilty because like it's good enough that it's not like, oh, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, I might go to Katherine. I should just jump in the car and get to the Katherine anytime I'm craving your food. So
Thank you. That means, listen, it means the world. That's what, we don't want it to be a just because, I'm in the neighborhood, let me stop
exactly.
by. No, it has
Absolutely.
to be worth the drive.
Absolutely. And it is 100%.
Thank you.
100%. And so you were 15 years old in Florida. I mean, when I was 15, like so many things go through your head. You want to do everything. What drove you to a kitchen? Where do you start? In that road to where you are today?
So, at 15, moving to Florida, fucking hated it.
Beyond the weather, like the hot summers.
You're a teenager. All you know about is your friends, and
Yes.
if you're taken out of your comfort zone, that's a hard time to be thrown somewhere else. Kids are mean. Finding new friends is hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're trying to be cool, and you're not. Girls don't like you. You know what I mean? What the fuck are you going to do? So, I don't know. At least that was my story. I wasn't a jock. So, I played football, so I liked hitting people. But I never liked, I wasn't going to be a star athlete. So, I was always like a loner type guy. So, I found a job. I found some friends that ended up being lifelong friends. I was talking to them right now. I have like
Nice.
5 best friends from that high school that we
Wow.
all stayed best friends for over 30 years now.
Wow.
We're all like godfather to each other's kids and best men to each other's in weddings, and we're like brothers. So, the universe... And for me, I'm a person of faith. I'm a sinner. I'm horrible. But like God had to put us on the trajectory because we moved there to West Broward, not Miami. I met some really cool people that kind of... My friends that I met, one's Haitian, one's Jamaican, one Costa Rican, one's Colombian, one's Puerto Rican, one's a white Jamaican.
Wow.
That's fucking diverse as shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's like, number one, that's super diverse. Number two, that was like my first splash of water of South Florida.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And then you start learning as you go to each of their houses after school, smells. What's this house smells like when there's arepa con huevo at one house. And then there's pinto de gallo at another house. And then there's curry chicken in another house. And then there's John and legume and griot in another house. So for me as a fat kid, I'm like, what's going on? So that was more of like the rainbow and the splashes of what I think South Florida is, the beautiful cultures and diversity. So that started to always kind of build the wheel. My first job, ironically, was in a fish market, which I never thought they were the only place that would hire kids from the school. But that was my first interaction at 15 years old, surrounded by seafood, different cuts of fish, cracking stone crabs for orders, dealing with all these type of product. Just because it was like you work at Publix as a bagger as a kid, or you work at where I worked as a fish peddler. And it was just crazy. It was just like, my whole life and my soul, like this was, I think, truly meant to be. I was, doing an internship for the finance career because I didn't make a switch yet. I just met my girlfriend. I was working at Smith, Barney and Shearson, which is an old brokerage house for an internship. And a woman there said, what's your name? Where's it from? And I said, my mom said it was always from the Bible. This is my name, Timon. She's like, I don't think so. A week later, she's like, I went through all the books and I found your name.
Wow.
And it's right. It's from the Bible. I said, really? I said, what is it? And I'm in finance, right?
Okay.
I'm doing, my road is to go to Wall Street. I'm in high school. I have a general education. I do something called Academy of Finance. So we have a duality major. I'll graduate with college credit and, I'm going to go to Wall Street. That's the plan. Because I also want to get back to New York. I felt like my soul, there was unfinished business in New York. You know what I mean? Like my father was there or something. I felt like I was going to find who I was or something. So anyways, that's another whole fucking long story. But anyways.
We got time, by the way. But
she's like, I found your name. I said, what's the name? She's like, you were a Roman. The name Timon was a Roman guard that would take food and give it to the Jewish prisoners.
Wow.
I was like, wow, that's crazy. And I still didn't decide at that time.
Wow.
I didn't know. I was just like, wow, she's right. It was in the Bible. So it wasn't until like 2 or 3 years later that we took the leap of faith and I dropped out of high school. My girlfriend said, try it. And I thought like, listen, before I go further and spend more money with education, let me try this because this is my passion. I don't think I can do it. It's probably never going to happen. I jumped in with her friend that worked at a restaurant and I never looked back.
Wow.
And I went to another restaurant, started as a prep cook. In 6 months, became a kitchen manager. A chef used to come and get drunk in the counter. He used to wear chef whites. I saw the chef whites, thought it was professional. The owner said, give this guy a chance. Let him get a job with you at the hotel. He said, okay, you start in 2 weeks. So we started the first day of Passover. I made 1,000 matzah brie omelets at 6 in the morning.
Wow.
And that was my first day in the kitchen of a real professional environment. And I was fucking addicted. I looked at Garde Manger. I saw chefs in whites. I saw this old executive chef with the toque and the hat. And it blew my fucking mind. It was like watching Martin Yan again.
Wow.
The chopping of the knife, and I was mesmerized. There's different kitchens. You wear a uniform. You look like a chef. I was fucking all in. All in.
Going back to the Bible thing, you know why we're such good friends?
Why?
My name means gladiator in Arabic.
Oh, yeah?
So we're both in the same...
universe of
exactly.
Wow.
I don't
Really?
know I don't know if I had to feed the people, but it means gladiator. So we're the same.
You're the fighter.
Yes, exactly.
In the arena.
Yeah, while you are feeding.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there you go.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you think that has any association with the character of the man you are?
I hope so. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely a fighter, but I'm not like the aggressive kind of anything. But yeah, I guess it's a different kind of fight.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm a Scorpio too. So
Are you? Yeah.
Yeah. So
you are. That's
yeah.
When's your birthday?
October 25th.
I'm 29.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, there. That's sick.
Fuerte.
Amazing. Qué
Wow.
fuerte. Qué bueno. So we need to celebrate this October, somewhere
We
27th.
do, brother.
We do something on the 27th.
Let's go.
Perfect.
Let's
Perfect.
go. It's a deal. You got it on camera now.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's invited too. If you want to come to a party.
So Um, I'm gonna fast forward,
Yeah.
and I've said this in different times. When you came to Miami 12 years ago, 10 years ago, sugarcane was the place to go. Like, no matter, like, Miami was not a culinary city, was not a hub for great food. People came here for shopping, for beach, for partying, clubbing, whatever. You didn't come to Miami to eat. You had to eat eventually, but people didn't care, tourists didn't care. However, at the time, there was an amazing group of chefs like you, Michelle Bernstein, Michael Schwartz, Jose Mendin, and you know the names better than I do, that were planting the seeds, and we were talking about it before going live. You guys were planting the seeds of what Miami is today. The good Miami is today, because there's a culinary scene in Miami that we don't care of, or it's for different public. But the Miami that really matters, with the chefs doing interesting things today, you planted those seeds. So how did you end up opening Sugarcane, which again, I think it was Pobelli, Sugarcane, maybe Michi's. What was Michel's Bernstein before, after Azul, no?
Yep,
You were in
Michi's.
Azul too. I mean, there was not wasn't much more at the time. How did you end up opening Sugarcane? It was a very, I would say, aggressive or optimistic platform, because Sugarcane was huge in a moment where maybe it wasn't even in South Beach. Like, there were so many things particular to that place that tells a lot about the vision of the group who opened it and the people who believed in the project.
Copy. No, for sure. And I appreciate that. And, you know, the way it has to be said is this. First of all, thank you for that, brother. But I carried a torch. The torch was forged and lit by other people before me. So those were Norman Van Aken, Alan Susser, Douglas Rodriguez, Mark Militello, you know, Robin Haas. These guys really are the pioneers of gastronomy in South Florida.
Okay.
You know, in Fort Lauderdale, there's guys like Oliver Saucy, Dean James Max. This is what I'm talking about there as a student of the art. These guys came up. These guys are, you know, I think Norman's from Key West.
Yes.
And Douglas is from here. But I think the other chefs gravitated to South Florida with the gastronomic instillment of like Alice Waters from Chez Panny, Jean-Louis Paladin in the East Coast and Washington. When gastronomy was penetrating the United States as a whole, making its revolution.
We're talking 70s, no?
Yeah, like 70s, going into the 80s and the early 90s. These guys were really coming to South Florida. They created a whole system, a whole genre called Floribbean Cuisine, where you had these, you know, chefs using French techniques with indigenous ingredients, highlighting local ethnicities. And it seemed gimmicky, but in retrospect, it's so genuinely organic. Wow. And it's what we should, the young generation, and including myself, should continue the torch. They had their moment, and a lot of us had to work for them. So then my moment was like the teenager graduating, leaving the house and going off to college. So a little bit, maybe just finishing college. So they kind of did all their studies. They cut their teeth in these places. Now, what are they going to do? They have to go out and prove themselves. So then you have those generations of where I say myself, you know, like Jose Mendin, myself. We're like local guys. We went to Johnson and Wales in North Miami. We've been in kitchens all over South Florida, watching the Michelle Bernstein start coming up. The of course OG Michael Schwartz. You know, all these guys. They were really continuing with those chefs that I just talked about before, as far as making it a lateral gateway. Because South Florida was always the area where New York would come to party on South Beach, or any, you know, all eyes on the quote unquote the Riviera of the United States, you know. But again, like you said, a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, party, and, not really the super arts. There's not the theater here. We're a young city compared to these deep-rooted East
Absolutely.
Coast cities. So it's taken the time for development, and it's taken a lot of people to migrate here and bring a lot of those great characteristics to this evolving city, right? So I was blessed to be with some really good partners that took a leap of faith in that area of Midtown, because I remember I opened a restaurant a couple blocks away and Midtown was decimated.
Yes.
It's very important to say 2008 economic crisis, the whole, country felt it, and we kind of emerged when you saw that many fine dining chefs were leaving the white tablecloth restaurants
Yes.
and going to that upscale, casual, whether they were called gastro bars or gastro
bistronomic.
pubs. Yes, it was, you had all this talent that essentially needed to find new homes, but then knew that they didn't want to do it with, super fancy ways. So you saw a really good emergence of like what you see in the East Coast, West Coast, of just really good neighborhood restaurants emerge with a really good pedigree of talent, really good integrity, great creativity. And I think the city was ready to support it, because up until then, all of us young chefs, when we talked to other chefs, you'd say, where's the next generation? Where's the good new chefs, good restaurants? Everyone would leave. We were always like flocking to New York, flocking to Chicago, flocking to Las Vegas, San
Because
Francisco.
that's where the good restaurants were, supposedly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like I was was one of the first generation of creators that came home or organically, that went, cut their teeth in these cities, but brought that back and then took your own imprint of your city. And this is the platform. So Sugarcane was a very magical operation, magical opening in a neighborhood where nothing was around at the moment. It was, it was meant for me personally to be where chefs wanted to eat after work. So there would always be chefs there. So we do like, what do you do after work? If you're in New York, you go get a taco, you go get good sushi, or you go to K-Town and you have Korean barbecue or yakitori. So, if you're in LA, the same thing. You go and get these type of foods. So it was kind of like, let's open up a restaurant that has that, everything we love to eat, but it's also a vibe. And it worked for the foodies and it worked for the masses, because I don't think... For the masses, you didn't have to be in an Ocean Drive, super pretentious restaurant. And, we were in a neighborhood.
Yes.
And you just cooked with your soul.
Nice. And you were talking about Floridian cuisine. And I've always been talking to chefs here. You mentioned Miami is a super young city. Like, we don't have that much history. We're building that history. And is there like a Floridian or South Florida cuisine or that identity? And we're trying to look for it. I mean, you mentioned like Haitian cuisine and Venezuelan and Colombian and Jamaican. So I think we're building that identity. And it's now that you mentioned that generation, there's a book on Jeremiah Tower's book. He talks about when he was at Japanese, he did a series of dinners, of like regional dinners in the US, and he did a menu of like Floridian cuisine without being here. So that was his vision of what Floridian cuisine in the 70s would be. And you read that menu, it's amazing. And I always had a dream, and then I'm making it public here. Like, we should gather, I think it was like 7 courses, like 7 chefs, and each one of them take one of those dishes, reinterpret it, and make that dinner that Jeremiah Tower thought of in the 70s and doing it here in 2024, whatever. That would be amazing to understand what's Floridian cuisine, no?
Yeah, listen, it's so impactful. Think about other artists in their mediums, like whether it's, design or whether it's like fashion, there's always like an impressionist moment or a technique that's looked upon. What we're saying is like that chef from a different part saw this technique having so much representation. You take note in that. And that almost defines this whole era in this region during this time and moment that should live almost forever. It should have a place in history, at least in culinary history in this
Absolutely.
region, because I mean, you have some really good chefs cooking, and they're friends, and they're pioneers in this region. And of course, so many people come, and Miami and South Florida's having their moment. Florida's having a moment where their Michelin's coming, and to more cities like Tampa, Orlando, and Miami. But when you say, what is your impressionist mark that you're leaving on the whole global, I feel like we may still be lacking for a strong definition, because there could be so much more. We have the ability and the possibility of so much more, because we are so beautiful in diversity. We have to figure out some agricultural supply chains to be more, fluid there. But we have abundance in our region to really.
Yeah. So going back to sugarcane. So, I mean, sugarcane, super successful. I think it's one of the few restaurants that it's still open. And I'm not talking about like a little Papa Mom restaurant. Like if those of you who have been to sugarcane,
I wanted it to be like a artisanal, like a Balthazar, like a pastis of Miami.
Yeah, and I think it is.
I always wanted it to be, and I think it represents that.
Yeah.
If you can go to a city and associate the city, that restaurant with the city, then it has a strong, genuine, organic, representation.
And at some point, went to Vegas, Brooklyn. So what do you think was the legacy that, even though it's still open, but when sugarcane came to the market, what do you think was the legacy that left or is living in like a younger generation of chefs? Like, do you see today people around who went through your kitchens? Like, how do you feel about it?
I'll say two things. One of the first impactful things is the legacy it left on, just commercial real estate and that movement, because prior to that, many restaurants were only on South Beach. It was part of the movement of like leaving the major epicenter and really giving value in high residentially areas. It's the emergence of neighborhood eateries, at that scale. You always have beautiful restaurants in the Grove and the Gables and so forth. So it's not the first, no, but it was like during a time when a lot of eyes were on there. So that kind of, I think, gave a lot of faith to young chefs or people to cook in their neighborhoods around their community, and then gave them the faith to genuinely cook their flavors and tell their stories. You know what I mean? The one of the most beautiful one, of course, is a friend, and his great talent is, Mendine and Pub Belly.
Yes.
You know what I mean? In Sunset Harbor. You know what I mean? You saw these guys and us, girls, we'd go to the Chicagos and see Avex and Publicans and, go to New York and see these restaurants. But Miami is not so neighborhoody restaurant, a neighborhoody feel as well, with the high rises and how do you live in the basement or the ground floor. It's a car city. You had to drive everywhere, so it's kind of like that renaissance of neighborhoods and community that kind of like followed.
And at some point, before I've been living here in Miami for a little bit more than 8 years, at some point, like if I had to spend one night in Miami, like if I had one meal in Miami, I would go to Jose's Pub Belly when he started in Sunset Harbor. It was what he was doing there was amazing. But again, I remember other places, Gigi, Sugarcane.
All these places you're saying are like chef-driven restaurants.
Exactly.
So it was like the renaissance of chef-driven restaurants on Miami. Even, again, it seemed like there was a lot at that moment beyond just Michael's and Mishi's.
Absolutely. But you did Sugarcane. Sugarcane was the same group of Sushi Samba, no?
Yep.
So you were at Sushi Samba in New York.
Yeah.
And then you came here to open Sugarcane. Massive operations. I don't know how many employees
those are big restaurants.
Yeah. But then how was that transition? I want to spend some more time talking about Balloo.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was something between Sugarcane and Balloo, but how did you go from a super corporate position, you were overseeing at least 3 sugarcane operations, traveling a lot. Again, probably overseeing tens, if not hundreds, of employees to go to one of the most, I think, personal restaurants that I've been eating in Miami, or I ate in Miami, and so attached to the person or the team behind it. How was that transition? Was it also like a sacrifice? Because I guess you gave up like a corporate salary to venture into
To go broke.
exactly, to be an entrepreneur. Let's say an entrepreneur.
Yeah, yeah.
How was that?
That's broke.
Yeah, how was the transition? What was the driver for that?
Well, listen, like even
Which I appreciate and thank, because Balloo was great.
it's fucking magical
It
restaurant.
was magical.
It was, and I never believe in myself, so let me say that I have one of the lowest self confidence. You won't, maybe I don't know. You won't. Cooking is is like the only place I could literally express myself in a conversation, because I'll be the introvert, quiet person. Unless I drink a shitload of alcohol, then I'm the wild fucking party guy. But it always gave me the confidence. But I say that because when cooking, when I started my journey, I was always trying to strive. So to answer your question is really more to answer the question of the individual's life. Because, when I took the leap of faith into cooking, and I told you I went to a hotel and I realized what a brigade meant. That's also when I learned what the Floribbean Mango Gang was, what I learned what James Beard was, where I learned what Michelin was, Raleigh Chateau, 5-star, 5 diamond, all this stuff. And I realized I wanted to learn about that. So I went and started working for like some of the best chefs in the independent space. I knew I wanted to pursue this career, so I had to get to Europe. So I went and worked for chefs that happened to have Michelin stars, great institutions. All of that always came from a place of anger, self-doubt, and uncertainty, because I never knew who I was. So I went and assimilated myself in foreign kitchens. I went to French kitchens. I actually wanted to go to France to be better than the French. So when I come back to the United States, they wouldn't think I was like just an immigrant dishwasher. I wanted to go and beat them on their own turf. So when I got back, they could never talk shit about me. I went and put myself I left my house when I was at the age of 17. I rented a room at my girlfriend's house with her Colombian grandmother.
Wow.
Because she gave me a space. I kind of got kicked out and I didn't have anywhere to go. And she's like, yo, my parents, you have to marry me before we live together so you could rent a room in my abuelita's house.
Wow.
We couldn't speak. But I'd work, 40 hours in the restaurant or the hotel. I put myself in, Johnson & Wales nights and weekends. So I'd do the other 2 days, 14, 16-hour days. I was 100% all in with cuisine because I wanted to make sure no one could say anything about me. Wow. I had an education. I got to Europe. I worked there. So don't say I couldn't fucking go there. You know what I mean? So that way I could have all the cards and the chips stacked in my favor for any choices. When I got back to the United States, it was like, if we're going to cook, which I am, then I have to cook in New York. So how do I get to New York? And that's when I first met the Sushi Samba people. I actually met them because Jose Mendin left Nobu and became their chef on Lincoln Road. And Jose was in laboratories with some Spanish, and I was working with some Spanish and, La Broche, which was like disciples of, El Bulli and Molecular. So the worlds were small. He loved Asian. I wanted to find out my roots. So I wanted to ultimately get to Asia and find out who I was and where my road came. So that all of these decisions were never like taking a job. My whole road in every restaurant was to learn a technique, work for a chef because they practice this technique or this system, and everything was for a skill set. So it was never for money. It was the only thing when I first took the initial leap and left the finance and dropped out of school, I was working for free, and it was the only thing I was willing to do for free. So that's when I went all in.
So for you, leaving a position at sugarcane to fulfill another step of that dream
it was actually so leaving sugarcane was my midlife crisis because I did all this corporate stuff when everything prior to doing corporate stuff was for the art. Everything was for the culture of cuisine. You know, I'm a little older. We're a little older. You know, before 2000s and all the internet stuff, you had to go to Japan to learn this technique. You had to go to Rosas to learn the spumas. You had to travel around the world,
Absolutely.
stage, knock on the door, and get your ass in there. You couldn't pull up YouTube and watch the technique. You couldn't even pull up the internet and get the recipe.
Yes.
You may get it in a different language. So you have to translate the thing. So, I mean, this is such a tangible art. It goes beyond the recipe. You have to see the nuances of the technique, how they're touching, holding temperature, you know, all this stuff like this. So everything was devoted for that. It was never about the money. So when doing sugarcane was my first adulthood of being realistic. You have a child, you have to provide, you have to pay the bills. So that was my first act of unselfishness. And that went for a long time. Did it very well. Did the job very well. But my soul was always incomplete because I was always stifling my genuineness, because my whole goal was to discover who I was. We tried to reconcile with my father a couple times to find out my Asian roots, my Indian and Trinidadian roots. I kind of like just pushed it all away, and I never really embraced who I was. And I was realizing that, you know, I couldn't create and I couldn't cook genuinely until I had to like deal with some realities within my culture and my family, heal some wounds and learn about that culture. And it took a long time. It wasn't until 38, until I was 38 years old. So I kind of like that road opened and we kind of reconciled when my father was passing. I met some of my other family that was on his side. And that's when I also realized I didn't build, I had great partners and I was part of this movement of sugarcane, and it was a great business and it was successful. But I lost a lot of my soul.
Okay.
The soul of the cook that was going there. And I needed to find that balance. So for me, it was to throw my middle fingers up and say, fuck you to the corporate. You had all these resto clubs emerging on Miami. That's why you said this is a podcast for a different type of, it's for the culture of the real cuisine people.
Exactly.
Not the fucking foodies, the diehards. And I needed to just break away everything and go back to cooking every day and my hospitality. And even, listen, at the end of the day, the way we built the hospitality in sugarcane, I was coming from the Mandarin and we had internal and external guests, they would say, it's hospitality. You treat everyone like they came into your house. And if you could repeat that over in whatever setting, genuine hospitality will win them over. Of course, you have to have consistent, good product. It's great if you have a story that can connect, but everyone can relate to a sensory moment of a holiday. Maybe it's a birthday, maybe it's like Thanksgiving, maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's a family gathering. Those memories are so vital that when we live, we yearn for, nourishment. We yearn for love. A lot of that is always around the table. So that's how we built sugarcane. That's how I built all my, hospitality philosophy at Balloo. So Balloo was the recreation of my family's culture and my wife's, because we've spent so much time together. It was down a shady-ass hallway.
Yes, downtown.
Which to me meant everything, because it's almost like the most dirty, rusty, grungy lamp, and if you had faith in rubbing it, that's where the genie was. You can go to all these other cities around the world where they knew it wasn't about the glitz and glitter. Some of the best fucking restaurants were down in a subway station or around a corner or out of this back alley. So that was my love story to Miami, even after cooking so many years, that you have to trust the stewards and have faith in this. So when they did do that, I had great partners that were the realest motherfuckers too. Elad and Gabe from Bar Lab. They were good humans made that.
Yes.
They had faith in me. They believed in me more than anyone. And we told the story of my family. My daughter would be the hostess. My wife would be the hostess. It looks like you came in the kitchen. I had great fucking people working for me, young chefs like Melissa Sosa. She was like one of the youngest prodigies I always have, one of the best chefs I ever fucking was able to cook with. We had good humans around, and we told a story that was a story of like Miami. It was, you know what? It was an American story.
Yes.
Our country is so diverse, and it was like just during a time where people would support that too. You got to remember, there's always these creatives. There's always artists. There's always people of diversity, but it's not till big business and people support that that their voices and their stories can be told.
And that could be felt when you talk about how Balloo was built with people and love and everything. You could feel that when you were there. And I don't know what's the formula. I don't know. It wasn't, maybe it was the decor, it wasn't the decor, it was the menu, or it wasn't the menu, the service. But all that together, you could feel it. And then it was super casual, the place, for those of you who didn't go. As you mentioned, you are in downtown at the Ingraham building.
I keep the Instagram up so people could still see. It says closed, but yeah, it's
you
important.
walk, you enter a door, you walk in a hallway, and it's
it
at the end.
has cockroaches and fluorescent lights flickering.
And then you find this little place, I don't know, like 20-something seats, open kitchen, tiny kitchen, and the food was delicious. I always talk about that. I mean, the whole menu was great, but every now and then I like crave that chili crab noodles that you made.
A good one.
That was one of my favorite dishes of Miami's culinary history, probably. Like if I had to write a book.
For real?
Yeah. No, it was amazing. But I mean, even though it was delicious, it was well done. I love spicy food, and it was spicy. But it's one of those dishes that like touches your heart and tells you many other things beyond the actual food. No, it told a story, and that could be sensed in the whole menu and the vibe. So, I mean, it was great. I still remember during like early COVID days, ordering food and
you're
like
a great supporter.
meeting friends. I would meet
you
friends.
take meetings.
Yeah, we would like meet in the sidewalk, and we were both like three friends or whatever, like grabbing bags from Balloo, talking there for 15 minutes with our masks on because we had no clue what was going on, and like with gloves and holding the bags, and then go home and have like I was by myself, so I would order food like for 2-3 days.
Nice.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Was great. That was great.
To pause you on that, you know what the Balloo was, and it could be to make it relatable to anyone watching this podcast that maybe never experienced that or even knows about food. You can be in a different industry. It's when a creator has full control over their medium. And we find that in certain things, maybe photography and art. The restaurant industry is a fucking hard industry, dude. You know what I mean? So it's hard. There's these restaurants we love, and then you get hype over the celebrity of what restaurant industry is. But it's hard to be genuine when you can find every chef really cooking and 100% unadulterated their vision, their story, that they have talent and the story is fucking good, but then they're also profitable. That they're not just aimlessly doing it for self-gain, and they could sustain a livelihood for their staff. They can employ people where it changes their life. You know, you go from someone who maybe had to cross the border in the frontera with coyotes, and they come to this country trying to build a better life for themselves as a dishwasher, and they get an opportunity to become a busser or a prep cook, and then eventually a server, a cook. This fucking impactful stuff that we take for granted. And no one sees it when they come and they want to give you a 1-star review. No one sees it when they just come and say, why the fuck are the lights like this or like that? And they want to shit on your fucking establishment. It's so much more when you have fully adulterated creatives allowing a genuine, true, qualified message. And that's what that was. And it was just important, I think, for Florida. It was important for me. It was important for Miami. And it was important for, I hope, young generations of chefs to have faith in their culture and in faith in themselves and their story to make that, when you say the leap was hard, but the leap had to be made. I wasn't getting any younger.
Absolutely.
And I actually had the defining moment to answer your question was, I was on the cover, successful. I realized, a lot of chef friends said, man, we'd like to be like you. You got, this looks good. We just have a small restaurant. And I'm like, no, I want a small restaurant, which was like fucking backwards. But I needed to show my daughters that they own their talent. Okay. And that being in this country and what our parents came to strive for, you can make yourself whatever the fuck you want to be in this beautiful country without limits. But you have to go do it.
Absolutely.
So that's what Balloo was, to honestly.
Yeah. At some point, I thought about it, and it's so personal. And like we do this at Autonomy in my agency, we do a lot of branding for restaurants, a lot of chefs, and not a lot, some or many restaurants and chefs come to us to do their branding, the name, everything. And I haven't done it yet. To name a restaurant after your last name, it takes so much courage.
All your balls on the table,
so much confidence, balls, everything. Because you were at Sushi Samba, Shuriken, Japan. What was the name?
Where?
With Ilad?
There was Samba, Mandarin Oriental.
Exactly. And you said, okay, this is Balloo. This is going to be called Balloo because it's me, it's my family, it's who I am. And that takes a lot of balls and tells a lot about what you intend that place to be. And having said that, is that project like in the back burner? Would you resurface it given the right conditions, the right deal?
That restaurant is so we want to resurrect that restaurant only in Miami. We think maybe New York, but no. It's a Miami. It's like a baby of Miami that needs to grow in Miami.
I agree.
It's a voice of Miami that needs to be supported by Miami people. But it's a place where, with all of our diversity in Miami, it's crazy how much there's not Afro-Caribbean representation. There needs to be, and there is more now, and we were lucky to be part of that moment of voices, but. It's important that on a global stage, when people look at Miami, they see every single layer of the color of the rainbow.
Yeah.
Not just 2 or 3 colors of a flag, which for many years it's always represented that way, whether it's hardcore Latino, hard Cuban, or you know what I mean? So it has to, there's so much diversity in the city that's so beautiful.
And talking about Miami, we are in a moment in the city, yes, Miami, people say it's like the hottest city in the U.S. for restaurants. Everybody's opening here. Everybody's moving here. Everybody wants to be in Miami. But then you've been here longer than I have. It's not that easy. Restaurants have a hard time. I would take apart the 2-3 years of COVID, which was, I think, an anomaly in the market. Very positive, I always say, if you had your restaurant empty during COVID in Miami, you better do something else, no? But now, again, it's hitting the reality now. I mean, Miami is not an easy city to be an entrepreneur, to be a restaurateur. You mentioned you opened in Fort Lauderdale, even though you have connections with Broward, but I mean, rents are crazy in Miami.
Stupid.
People have to go look somewhere else where you can actually have a profitable or even break even, no?
Yeah. It's like gentrification.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you see that? What's your take on that? Do you think it's gone? Do you think we have a way to get back that possibility of having access to places where a chef can truly express an identity, express a philosophy? Or is it just for the corporate budgets and the chains and the big hospitality groups with funds
Yeah.
funding them.
Yeah. Listen, I'm no super like fucking talented entrepreneur businessman. I'm just struggling with a mom and pop. I'm a creative. What I can tell you from a creative aspect, Miami is definitely has changed. It's forced me to kind of move to the outskirts. I always associate, like, you think of Manhattan, New Jersey, Long Island. You know, we're in our Manhattan moment, and it's hard to be in the city. It's easier to be on the outskirts. You know, the economics will push to the outskirts. The creatives here, I think it's hard for us to find a platform to be able to preach or practice. I mean, you could go to what they call the ghetto or the lower, you know, economic areas and try to find spaces, but those permit their own struggles.
Yeah.
You know, what the customers want to go there. Do they want to go there? Our business as a whole, cost of goods, cost of labor, cost of rent, all operational costs, finding talent.
Yeah.
Struggle goes on and on. I'm sure a lot of industries feel that, but, you know, the food service is still one of the most difficult. You have to have a good formula. The formula doesn't mean like some super creative food. The formula could just be like, what kind of restaurant do you always see open in Miami? A fucking Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
How many more Italian restaurants does a city need?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like...
And we're still lacking like good Asian. I mean, yeah, there's like a couple of Thai, one Vietnamese, one, I don't know, but we're lacking more diversity. Even though we're getting diverse, but yeah, if you want to have a sure shot, open an Italian restaurant.
Or what's everyone doing now, which is, they're doing it very well, but everyone's got a pizza.
Yeah.
Every restaurant's a pizza. You're a bar with pizza.
And a
everything
crudo.
with pizza.
Yeah, no matter what restaurant you open, you have a pizza and a crudo. And then,
so I always say it has to take the community to demand it and to support it. And then that will, you know, that will ultimately be the changing tide. That's what happened to Sugarcane. And I mean, Sugarcane was a big restaurant. It wasn't a small restaurant.
Yeah.
And it was, we saw how Midtown grew all around it. But, you know, it's a time and a moment. I implore, you know, I hope you have some really fucking powerful people watching your podcast and listening.
We all hope so.
It's the developers. It's, you know, the politicians. You know, if it's all about business and money, of course, build a high rise, go vertical, sell it for what it is, and take off to a different state. But I mean, eventually it's going to be saturated and very commercial.
Yeah,
right?
and it's like real estate what's driving the business. I mean, people don't care if they have an empty place. They rather have it empty than have like bring somebody for a decent rent to like start a business.
And what you'll see is, sorry to go back, but the operators that are coming here, they're not from here.
Yeah.
It's like a tourist kind of visiting, or it's like I told you, I said something off camera. It's like, you know, all these really good people, really good chefs, super talented. Maybe you haven't even heard of them. They're gone and had to leave Miami. They were the ones here making the soil fertile. They were planting the seeds, fucking tilling the mill, you know, putting all the nutrients in the soil. And some other people come, plant their seeds real quick, and you think that's what that garden's about. You know, Miami is so deeply rooted that most of the great talent had to almost leave again.
Wow.
So there's not a sustaining moment. And what they're cooking is not necessarily Floribbean cuisine. It's what can sustain themselves and be profitable, because it is a business.
Yeah.
So how much of the business is true curated storytelling and then survival? So are we just feeding the masses, or are we elevating the culture?
Yeah. And how do you see yourself now? We talk about Norman Van Aken's generation, then Michael Schwartz, Michelle, you, and now there's a super group of talented chefs. A lot from Miami, but a lot also, like, one thing that Miami has, it receives a lot of immigration from Latin America. So every time there's a problem in any country in Latin America, which is like every year, there's like a wave of immigration.
Of chefs.
Yeah. How do you see this new generation? I mean, definitely you are a role model. You were named like one of the top 16 black, most influential black chefs in the U.S. Definitely you have a voice. People look after you, look at you as a role model. how do you see this new generation of chefs? Like some of them might want like immediate success and with social media and everything, but then I think there's also a group of chefs who are true to the work, to what they want to do in terms of how they want to express themselves as cooks.
So to be completely transparent and honest, initially I was somewhat like reluctant and like very negative and pessimistic on the future because, you know, whether you're dealing with the younger generations and work ethics and instant gratification and so forth you're referencing, this trade is so like meticulous and enduring that you just have to do things for a long time. And some people can't weather the tide. They just want all of that immediate gratification. It's like a two-part answer to your question. But with that said, as you filter out some of the passerbys, since it's such a hard industry, many people don't want to get into it. And the people that do get into it genuinely really are vested and care about it. You know, it's been a long time coming that the industry needed to shift in wellness, how we treat our staff, how we, you know, treat each other, how customers treat us, how we can treat the customers. So that I think COVID really shined a light on that, and that's a beautiful like recalibration that we're working towards. So the younger chefs, I actually admire many of them because you're seeing these chefs that, you know, the Miami Slice guys, they started baking at COVID. You know, I just went and these Tam Tam guys, you know, they were doing private dinners. So it kind of fascinates me to see that. It gives me a lot of faith in the direction of what our city and where food's going. So that's the one part of the answer. The second part, when you ask about other chefs coming to this city, that part, I love that part. That's like, you know, New York and Ellis Island. The more diversity and culture and genuine authenticity you bring is only going to make our melting pot that much more beautiful. So for me, that does mean the world. It's, you know, I love that. I love seeing that. As a whole, I'm kind of anti big restaurants, but you know, some of those are big restaurants, like from Peru and XYZ, and some are small, and it can't take away the fact that if they're talented and they're representing a story and culture, and I'm always root for that. I'm always rooting for the culture and the authenticity of our industry.
So you are optimistic about where Miami is heading in terms of the food scene. And I know we're gonna always have South Beach, 5-star hotel, restaurant in Miami, but I'm talking more about the real
local
homegrown guys. Yes. Yeah. Do you see? And finally, I mean, you were yourself like nominee or finalist of James Beard. Finally, we got a chef winner with Val. I don't know who was the last one.
I think it was 12 years before with Michael.
Exactly.
Yeah, wow. Michael Schwartz.
Exactly. So
a winner.
Exactly, a winner. Yeah.
Many nominees.
Yeah, but I always saw like Miami was oversaw because that staple, or like we are a party town, people come here just for like to visit, and it's all about the scene and the party.
Yeah.
And finally, I think we are
a dining destination.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, finally we have an identity of ourselves. We have like a culinary scene. And I always say this example. I think even I have mentioned this in the podcast before. Like at some point I was with Ryan King. He's a writer, a journalist, and he's been in the show. And once, some years ago, he asked me, he was coming here and he wanted to write an article about how Miami's food scene is changing. He was going to be here like, I think, 3-4 days, and asked me to do an itinerary for him. I was like, dude, I mean, in 3-4 days, there's not much to see. But as I started doing that list, I realized like, dude, this is a sick itinerary.
Yeah.
I probably left restaurants out, and that's when I realized that it had changed.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Like think about it. Two of the best, if not more, best bars in the world are here.
Mm-hmm.
Between Broken Shaker and La Trova.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Michelin starred chefs that even are from different cities are here.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I think Miami always had that, you'd have that quote unquote, I feel like exploitation of big names coming. How vested they were, I don't know. But then you have all of the other talent that does come and they make it their own and they stay. And that's the part that will make the city grow. Because you always have South Beach, you always have the names. That's like the Vegas
it's gonna be
thing,
there.
you know what I mean? You always have that. You'll have all these resto clubs that come.
Yeah.
I always say it has to happen in the neighborhoods, man. The real definition of successful cities are in the neighborhoods.
Absolutely. I think I came to terms. I used to be a hater. Like everything in Miami that resembles like Vegas or Dubai, I would be like against it. Now I embrace it in a way. I mean, and I don't go to those places. If I need to go, I would go. Nothing against them. I embrace the fact that they bring jobs. I mean, they bring people. I mean, there's more. I think there's more tourists that like those restaurants. Than,
1,000%,
yeah.
dude.
So I mean, they do. They have their place in the market, and I came to terms in terms of okay, they're not for me.
Yeah.
They're for somebody else, and I'm fine with it. Not everybody wants to go to Tam Tam, to Balloo, to Boyade, and there's people who love Papi Steak or Komodo or Carbon, and that's fine. I mean, there must be choices for. Imagine all the tourists wanting to.
But we won't eat there.
We won't eat there.
No,
No,
we
it's
won't.
not for us. But it's actually good because they drive the tourists out of the places that we really love, so we can always find a table.
Listen, those people are fucking intelligent because they're more successful than me. But, what I can respect them for, it's the same thing like I would praise any journalist that called and we'd speak or they were a reviewer. Regardless if our opinions differed, I realized that what they were doing reached more people than I could reach on my solo message. That would bring people back, get their attention on my message. So if people are coming to Miami and just going to like those super big restaurants, they can't eat there every single night.
Exactly.
So they're going to start to make themselves aware.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I would like to think that they're going, part of the success has to be the food. Even if you're going for the party, dance on the fucking table, all that yada yada.
Yeah.
Part of it has to be like you're gluttony, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You want something good. So within that time frame, you're gonna at least maybe if you're on South Beach, go to Puerto Sagua. Maybe you're gonna hit La Sandwicherie.
Yes.
You know what I mean, you're gonna hit the true institutions, even a Joe's.
Absolutely.
So that is the true community and soul of Miami. So that they're helping as almost like a gateway drug to the real hardcore shit, which is us.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And how do you see? You were talking that you were recently in Paris with your family.
my guy.
And you were previously also, you took a sabbatical, you went to like Japan, Malaysia. How, like, do you travel, even though you have such a rich background, do you still feed yourself with different cultures, different
1,000%.
food?
So that is always me. I yearn for the culture. I yearn for like the story. I yearn for the love of that. I would love to see our cities grow and also our food culture grow to like these countries. Not only is it, I think, maybe just because it's so dense. So when you see something pop up, the demand is there, but the support is there. I think, we need more support in that to produce more storytelling. You know what I mean?
Yes.
chefs will do more than they can. Then they'll push themselves beyond because they're nurturers. So when Val's ready, there'll probably be concept 2 and 3 of a storytelling. You maybe, who knows? When you see the 50 best was just in Las Vegas, right? And you see Kike from Maido there, and guys from Central, and the whole world, Spain, like took everything. But these storytellers have these temples. You know what I mean? And I think, for every city has a lot of little shrines, maybe 1 or 2 temples, but a lot of little shrines.
Exactly.
The more shrines you have with the temples makes that place like...
Because just a temple with other shrines, I mean...
Yeah. So, I think we're building. I think, I employ the landlords and the smarter people. Support your city, man. Listen, you guys will be the true tail. Landlords need to give us better deals so we could sustain our businesses, and that will create, like, God rest his soul. What was Tony Goldman's one of the best things he did, right? He curated Soho, South Beach, and Wynwood. There's not that many of those humans that can be tried and true to curate a village, not just go quick and sell it for the high square footage and leave,
So I'm going to make here like a public plea. I hope
a plea.
Yeah, you find an amazing place to bring Balloo back to Miami.
Yeah, and more restaurants than that, but Balloo for sure. That's a fact. Let's go. That's
great. Well, Timon, it was amazing to have you here. I think
thank you, brother.
This is just part of the things that we've talked about, that we dreamed about. And as I mentioned, it's honor to have you here.
Thank you, man.
I don't know, you want to share something else with the people listening?
No, listen, please come support. We are cooking now. We're always cooking. New restaurants in Fort Lauderdale called the Katherine, 3 years old. Our 3rd James Beard nomination, first in Fort Lauderdale in over 20 years.
Wow.
Come support us, dinner only, Wednesday through Sunday. Catherine's the middle name of my wife, Marissa. It's our play. It's called A Love Story because it's a play from, cuisines on our travels. So it's basically a global menu, just like I did a sugar cane. Basically, that's who we are. Natural wines, funky vibes. It's what I call a new American table. That's what America looks like now. You guys should go support these, creators and these artisans in these regions, support small business. I'm still partnered with American Airlines. You can have my menu in their flagship lounge out of MIA Airport. Big ups to American for recognizing diversity and culture and trying to incorporate that in their program. It is what it is. Corporate wants to have that face, but it's a good face to have. And
it is.
It's more voices to the storytellers and the creatives. And I think if big business goes that route, going down to real estate, then we'll have much more fruitful activations and fruitful storytelling, and that will be the real culture of our country, our neighborhoods, and our city, man.
I hope so. Beautiful message, Timon. Again, thanks for taking the time to come here. And just as we drive to Katherine, you drove here to be
this is
in
the casa,
podcast.
Man. 305 is always in my heart.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody, for your time, for listening or watching us. This is One of Each. Thanks for the support. You can write your comments on YouTube in the comment section. And if you're listening in other platforms as well, you can follow us on Instagram in One of Each podcast. And again, thanks for the support. As we have people listening to us.
Thanks for doing what you do.
No, thank you.
And praise you and all your freaking hard work. Glutonomy, this podcast, bringing super talented chefs. Listen, he's talking all about me, but let's talk about this guy. He brings Massimo Bottura, one of the best chefs in the fucking world, to Miami. Come on, and many other chefs. So that's bridging the gateway. You're ambassador of La Mesa. The table in the community is where we break bread and great humans share their stories and learn about each other together. And you're fucking pioneer of that. So we're lucky to have you.
No, thanks. Same. Let's keep together building this community. Thanks
yeah.
for coming.
Awesome. Thank you,
Bye.
brother.
Thanks.
Thank you.